You know that feeling after a near miss on the road? That little jolt where you think, what if that had been a real accident? And then the next thought, what if it was kind of my fault? So, how does the legal system handle those messy, real world situations where the blame isn't so black and white? That's exactly what we're going to break down. This really is the million-dollar question, isn't it? And the answer? Well, it's not a simple yes or no. The truth is, the answer has changed a ton over the years. And today, it all depends on where you live and some really fascinating and sometimes surprisingly harsh legal rules. Okay, so before we can even start talking about who pays, we have to figure out what they're paying for. The whole point of a personal injury lawsuit is to use money to try and make the injured person whole again. But let's be real, how do you actually put a price tag on something like a serious injury? Well, the law breaks it down into two big buckets. First, you've got what are called special damages. Just think of these as the receipt pile. It's all the stuff you can easily add up. Medical bills, the wages you lost from being out of work, the car repair bill, anything with a clear price tag. But then you've got general damages, and this is where it gets tricky. How much is your pain and suffering worth, or emotional distress? The court has to figure that out, and then both are added together to get the total harm. With that idea in mind, let's hop in a time machine. For centuries, the law had this one simple and frankly incredibly brutal rule for anyone who was even a tiny bit to blame for their own accident. It was called contributory negligence, and it was an absolute legal sledgehammer. It did not matter if the other driver was 99% at fault for running a red light. If you were found to be just 1% at fault for, say, not signaling a turn quickly enough, if your carelessness contributed in any way at all, you were completely out of luck. And the result was always the same: zero. A big, fat nothing. You could have $100,000 in medical bills, but if you were found just 1% responsible, you got nothing. It was a harsh, all-or-nothing world. Thankfully, people started to realize just how unfair that system was. So, over time, the law moved to a much more modern, more intuitive approach, one that tries to share the blame instead of just pointing a single finger. This new system is called comparative negligence, and the logic here is pretty simple. Instead of a complete roadblock, the court just figures out what percentage of fault belongs to each person. Then, your financial recovery is simply reduced by whatever your percentage of fault is. It's about fairness and division, not total elimination. And wow, when you see it side by side, the difference is just staggering. Let's say your total damages are $100,000, and the jury says you are 30% at fault. Under that old, harsh rule, you get zero. But under these modern systems, you'd still walk away with $70,000. That is a game-changing difference for sure. But hold on, the story doesn't quite end there. Comparative negligence isn't just one single rule. It actually comes in a couple of different flavors, let's call them, and the difference between them can be absolutely huge. And here's the crucial twist. The most common system today has a cliff. If you are found to be 49% at fault, you can still get paid. But in many states, the second you hit 50% fault, or in some places 51%, poof, your recovery drops off a cliff, all the way down to zero. You're right back in that all-or-nothing world. That single percentage point can mean everything. Okay, so it's not just about the percentages of fault from the accident itself. Sometimes your right to get paid is decided by agreements you made way before anything bad even happened. Think about all that fine print. This is called express assumption of risk. And you know what this is. We've all signed them, those waivers before you go skiing or to a trampoline park or run a jet ski. You're signing a legal contract that says, hey, I understand this activity has risks and I accept them. If that waiver is legally solid, it can act as a complete shield for the company, blocking your claim before it even gets started. And get this, your responsibilities don't stop once the accident is over. There's a legal rule called the duty to mitigate damages. Basically, it means you have to act reasonably to keep your injuries from getting any worse. You can't just skip physical therapy for months and then expect the other person to pay for the extra problems that could have been easily avoided with proper care. Now, here's a rule that actually works in favor of the injured person. It's called the collateral source rule. And what it says is that the person who caused the accident doesn't get a discount just because you were responsible enough to have your own health insurance. Why should they benefit from your good planning? They still owe for the full cost of the medical care, even if your insurance company already paid the hospital. All right, so we've got all these different rules floating around. Shared faults, cliffs, waivers, this duty to minimize your own harm. So how does a court actually take all of this and land on a final dollar amount? Let's walk through an example to see how it works.
Let's put this all together with a biker and a driver. Step 1. The jury decides the biker's total harm, all those special and general damages, is worth $100,000. Step 2. They find the biker was 30% at fault, so we have to subtract $30,000. That brings us to $70,000. But then, step 3. The court finds the biker skipped physical therapy, which added an extra $10,000 in damages that could have been avoided. So we subtract that too. And what are we left with? The final award is $60,000. You can see how each rule just chips away at that initial number.
So what's the bottom line here? Well, first, our idea of fair has definitely changed, moving from that brutal all-or-nothing rule to a system that tries to share the blame. But second, remember that sharing often comes with that dangerous cliff, where being 50% or more at fault can mean you get absolutely nothing. Third, what you do after the accident really matters. And finally, never ever underestimate the power of that waiver you sign. And all of this brings us back to that central theme, doesn't it? Fairness. The law is always trying to balance these different ideas of what's right. So it makes you wonder, is a system that just cuts you off completely at 50% fault really the fairest we can do? Or do we just end up trading one all-or-nothing line for another? It's definitely something to think about.